Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 269, Insulin Shock, Type 1 Diabetes, and Reversing Colitis with Joshua Turner.
In today's episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talked to Joshua Turner about how going into insulin shock twice was actually the beginning of him taking control of his type 1 diabetes and completely reversing his colitis. Today, Josh is passionate about telling everyone he can that food is medicine and that it actually saved his arse. Well, it also saved his eyes, his heart, his stomach, and his overall life. His story of when he first became diabetic to gaining over 100 pounds to that week where he had to be brought back from insulin shock twice by the paramedics is more interesting and inspiring than anything I've heard recently. It's completely emotional. He gained his whole life back and has no one to thank for it but himself and plants, although Josh would say that Josh LaJaunie and his doctor had a lot to do with it as well. But at the end of the day, he showed up and he's the one who did the work.
What we love about this interview is how Josh is a regular guy. He spends his free time trying to make a difference. His story is so real, and the truth is that this story can be so similar to that of so many people that you know. Whether you know someone who's type 1, type 2, or pre-diabetic, please share this episode with them. Josh is so raw and real, and they'll for sure be able to find a bit of themselves in this story. We really appreciate you sharing this with everyone you know, and for those of you giving us those ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts, we really appreciate that as well. If you want a healthy, natural way to fuel your workouts or fire up your brain, Energy Bits are for you. Energy Bits are tiny spirulina algae tabs that are nutritionally dense, a source of mental and physical energy that is all natural and causes no stomach distress. They eliminate fatigue and hunger instantly with no caffeine, sugar, chemicals, gluten, or soy, just pure plant-based nutrition. One ingredient, 1 calorie, and 0 net carbs. I use them before workouts or sometimes just as a snack. They make me feel great and give me that extra energy boost I'm sometimes looking for. I also use Recovery Bits, which are tiny chlorella tabs. I use them after workouts or when I'm feeling hungry late at night. Visit energybits.com and order Energy Bits, Recovery Bits, Vitality Bits, or Skinny Bits, and use the promo code PLANTTRAINERS to get 20% off your order at checkout. The link will also be in the show notes just in case you didn't get that all down. Improve your energy, wellness, and waistline all at the same time with Energy Bits. Check out Energy Bits today and feel the difference. Your brain and body will say thank you. And now for a moment of gratitude.
I'm so grateful that I got to go to Texas a few weeks ago. I was there for a conference for some new health developments, and just learning about the science was incredible. But on top of that, it was the people that I got to meet. Some podcast listeners. Hey, Brianna. Hey, Matt. Hey, Rosanna, so many podcast listeners that came to the hotel to meet me and I got to spend time with, but also the people at the conference who were just the most amazing people ever. I'm just so grateful to share time and drink with beautiful people.
Not too long ago, I was down at the Toronto Veg Fest and I happened to be watching an athletes panel, and I went up to the moderator of the panel after it was over just to say how good of a job he did. And I looked at him, he looked at me, and we realized that I was his teacher 15 years ago.
Amazing.
And it was pretty cool. It was really neat to reconnect. And I'm just so grateful to have had that opportunity to see how much he's grown and changed in the last 15 years.
Josh Turner, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers Podcast today.
I'm glad to be here.
We're glad you're here with us, and we wanted to know if you have a moment of gratitude that you'd like to share with us and our listeners.
Well, my moment of gratitude is, I guess, just all the, like, being on y'all podcasts and being on TV and all. I never thought any of that would happen for me becoming healthy, you know. And, you know, it's given me a chance to actually help other people. So I guess that's my moment of gratitude with everything.
It's the helping other people. It's getting the message out there, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And then when you get that feedback that comes from like one individual saying, you really motivated me, you really helped me, how good does that feel?
Yes, ma'am. Well, actually, I actually helped the type 1 diabetic actually get off his pumps and things. And, you know, that's a big game changer for me, you know, because it actually shows that I'm actually helping, you know. And I never thought I would be doing that at all when I started all this.
Well, let's go back to before you started all this and tell us about what your normal life was growing up. Was health part of it at all?
Well, you know, as a kid, like when I was first, as a kid, I was a normal kid. But at 10 years old, I developed type 1 diabetes, and that changed everything. I actually had to grow up very fast then because I had to start giving myself shots, and, you know, my whole life changed. No more candy, no more any of that. And, you know, for a kid, that's a big game changer because, you know, who has to do that as a kid? Me, I didn't even know what was going on. And I've said this before in other podcasts that, you know, what kid has to start giving themselves shots? Their self, like actually having to give themselves shots because, you know, my mom and my dad, they weren't going to do it because they were scared of needles. So I had to actually learn to do it myself and test my blood and all that. But I really didn't do all that back then, testing my blood and all, because I was a kid. I wasn't too keen on pain.
So diabetes has become a major issue in society, and it always has been, but it's been even more prevalent in younger people. Do you want to just clarify for people the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes?
Okay, type 1 is, I will never get rid of it. Type 1, I will have it the rest of my life. There's nothing I can do. I will be insulin dependent for the rest of my life. What it is, my autoimmune system actually attacks the insulin that I produce, so it becomes not active. So I actually have to take insulin from an outsource to get rid of the sugar out of my blood. But I'm going to clarify that a little bit. Type 2 and type 1 is almost the same. It's almost the same. It's diabetes. Diabetes is diabetes, no matter what it is. It's diabetes.
Right. So in type 1, you're not producing insulin that can work within the body, that can take the sugar out of the blood. And in type 2 diabetes, you're actually producing insulin that should be working, but it is not working because it can't bring the sugar from the blood into the cells, and therefore, because the cells are all blocked up, so therefore it's not actually working, and you need to then use an outsource to control your blood sugar levels.
Yes, ma'am. That is absolutely correct.
Does that mean that before the age of 10, you actually had type 1 diabetes? You just never knew about it?
That I'm not really sure. I can't remember because I've been having diabetes for 30 years. This is all I can remember is having diabetes. So I really don't remember any of that. I remember just having diabetes my whole life, actually.
So when they told you you had diabetes, did you know what that meant already? What kind of reaction do you remember having as a 10-year-old child? I mean, our son is 10 years old, and I can't imagine telling him that he has a disease that he's going to have to live with for the rest of his life.
Well, I really didn't know what it was. I just seen my mom crying uncontrollably because I guess she knew what it was and I didn't. And it made me very scared as a kid of the unknown of what's going on, because, you know, now all of a sudden I'm taking all these shots. I'm going to all these classes. I've got doctors talking to me about all kind of things. I had no idea even what they were talking about, and saying that I would have to start giving up all kind of carbs. And it was just crazy for me as a kid trying to put all this in my brain and understand it. If that's even fathomable, like I didn't even understand what was going on.
So you were stuck here and you were kind of in this daze of, I can't eat candy anymore. I'm not supposed to eat carbohydrates anymore. My mom is sick and crying. And what's going to happen to me? And your candy was taken away, but at the same time, you ended up growing up to be over 200 pounds, despite no candy.
Yes. I actually ballooned over 200. I was over 230 pounds. That was the last time I actually weighed myself. I was 230 pounds. So I know I was well over that. Because when you get to that weight, you just don't want to weigh yourself anymore. You don't want to know how big you really are.
So when did that happen? When did you balloon?
Well, my mom actually passed away I was always a big guy in my 20s, but my mom passed away from heart disease. And that's where, like, everything just went out of control. I was eating uncontrollably, didn't care about anything, and, just I didn't really care about stuff. So that's where my weight just ballooned out of control at that point. I was eating everything. It was uncontrollably.
And did your diabetes suffer? Were you finding that you needed more insulin, or did you feel sick?
Well, at that age, I was sick all the time at that age. Like when I got in my 20s, I started getting very sick because I didn't even care about what I was doing because, you go through life with diabetes, and I know where people get like the type 2s and all, and it's like they don't care about fixing it because it's every day you're told how to eat and what to do, and you're picking yourself and you're giving yourself shots, and sometimes you just want to be normal. There's no normalcy to my life, but now I know how to control it. So if that makes any sense to y'all, I don't. It's hard for people that doesn't have diabetes to understand it, but I try to make it kind of make sense to people.
I think once you find acceptance for it, is that what you're trying to say? You found acceptance for it. You know how to manage it. You know what makes your body feel good, and you have a routine and you stick to it, and you know how to treat yourself right. So everything just seems normal now.
Well, that's where all this story becomes like, it starts making sense to diabetics if they can understand where my change came from. Because I don't know if you want me to get into my story yet, but this is where it all like starts making sense and where all my changes started.
Go for it.
All right. When this all started, there was a week where 2 times in 1 week, an ambulance actually had to bring me back to life because I had almost died twice from my diabetes. My sugars was so out of whack and all, so they had to actually bring me back from a shot to bring me back to life, actually, twice in 1 week. So,
was that heart condition or was that diabetic coma?
That was diabetic coma. Well, it was actually insulin shock. I was in shock.
Okay.
It's called insulin shock. I was in hypoglycemic.
Mm-hmm.
I became hypoglycemic. But all that had came to a head, so I was like, wow, I need to take control of this. I need to do something. So I went to see my doctor, and I walked in my doctor's office. I had just seen a brand new, he was an endocrinologist. I had never seen him before. So I said, well, I need to get this under control. Well, I went to see him, and he's like, man, your sugars are in the 10s, and your A1Cs are in the 10. So if I'm going to let people wrap their brain around A1Cs. A1Cs is they test your sugars over a 3-month period, and it gives them where they can see what your sugars actually are. So my sugars were in probably like the high 280s, 290s all the time in that 3-month period. So that's damaging your kidneys, that's damaging your eyes, that's damaging your nervous system, that's damaging everything. And that's why I'm trying to save people's life right now that have diabetes, because the doctor says, yes, your sugars are high, but we can get that under control, however, but that didn't work. But that's another story I'm going to share in a minute. But he said, look at you. He said, look at how you look. And I had never had anybody outside my family or my friends tell me, like, actually look how you look. And I was like, I actually looked in the mirror and I seen this big, heavy guy. And I'm like, wow, I need to start making changes. Well, there is a guy named Josh LaJaunie that was in my life at this point. He was telling me about being plant-based. And I'm like, what is that? And he's like, man, dude, try it. I've heard it has big effects on type 2s. So I'm like, he started telling me to eat plants. And I'm like, dude, you crazy. This don't even make any sense. Do y'all know who I'm talking about, Josh LaJaunie?
Yeah, of course. We've had Josh on the show a couple of times, and we've spoken with him at some events. For those of you listening that want to hear more about Josh, you can go back to episode 207, and that will give you a good brief background of his story. Josh is a great guy.
Yeah, he's like the vegan Elvis right now.
A little taller.
Yeah. Actually, he's a very tall guy. Well, when I left that doctor's office that day, my whole life changed. I had a treadmill that had been sitting on a porch forever. Well, I started walking on that day. Well, that ain't the only thing that changed that day. I started getting rid of meat. I got rid of red meat right away, and dairy went away right away. That day, everything changed. I got rid of it right away. Well, what changed also that day was when I started going back to my doctor, my blood sugars were getting better, but they were still high. They wasn't in the normal ranges of a normal person. So I started doing experiments. I started doing where I was going more to what Josh was telling me, like eat more plants. Well, when I started like eating meat at night and my sugars would be sky high in the morning. So I'm like, well, let me completely get rid of the meat. So when I got completely rid of the meat, I'm talking about in 2 days, my sugars were the same as a normal person with my insulin.
2 days.
2 days, normal, like completely no more up and down, normal sugars. So I'm like, the only thing I'm getting rid of is the meat that I was still eating. So I'm like, I'm done. I'm not eating it anymore. And my A1Cs went from a 10 to always staying in a 5.
And this means no poultry, no eggs, no fish.
Animal products at all.
No animal products.
At all. Completely gave them up. And I've been like that for almost 2 years now. Well, actually, it made 2 years like 2 weeks ago.
Wow. Congratulations on that timeline. We see it all the time. We have clients that even don't go completely plant-based and go very healthy vegetarians, and within 6 weeks come off of all of their insulin, or within a couple of weeks, their insulin goes in half, depending on how sick they were to begin with. And the power of plants and the power of not feeding yourself things that are actually harming you is just so huge, but you've got to get that mindset. And for you, looking in the mirror was that moment of, I got to start listening to people who know what they're talking about. I got to start doing something for me, because you were going downhill. You would have lost your sight. You would have lost a lot of things.
Yes, ma'am. And I actually had retinopathy. That's where it was damaging my eyes. Well, now, if you fast forward to now, I've actually got completely reversed that from just eating plants. Neuropathy, gone, out of my hands, completely gone. Like my doctor doesn't even know. He says I'm like his, what you call that when you say he's his prodigal son or whatever, because he has no other diabetics that have done this. This is the first time he's ever seen a plant-based diabetic. And he's completely amazed. He's like, if the diabetics listen or did what you do, he said, I wouldn't even have a job. And he shouldn't have a job, because type 2 diabetics, I'm a type 1, I can't get rid of it. If I was a type 2 and you told me, do this and you can get rid of it completely, I would jump on that train so quickly and ride it, because I'm never getting rid of it, ever. I'm going to have to live with this disease till I die. They have a choice.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you this message. The Plant Trainers podcast is free. and it will always be free. And we are so delighted to bring it to you every single week. But there's costs associated with it. For example, we have hosting fees and our time. How many hours a week do you think you put into this podcast?
I don't know, 3, 5,
So you
6,
edit it,
you depends.
You make images to go with it. There's lots of things that you put out there. I'm reaching out to people all the time, making sure that they're committed, making sure that the show notes are ready, making sure we have questions ready. Probably 10 to 15 hours a week or per show that go into creating this podcast for you. So if we were in person, I guess we'd say right now we're holding out our tip jar. And if you look on internet, you could find some really cool little tip jars like tips. They're like hugs without the awkward body contact. Or tips. Tip me, please, so I could send my cat to Buddha school or ninja school. All these cute little things. But Patreon takes that away. Basically, what Patreon is a way for you to leave a little tip saying, hey, thanks for the amazing job you're doing. Help us cover some of those costs that come along with the podcast. And you can help tip us by going to
patreon.com/planttrainers.
And we really do appreciate everyone who has done that before. And there's some perks that go with it. So make sure you check it out.
And now back to the show.
So Josh, why do you think that people are not jumping on it when they hear about it? Why do you think they're not invested?
I'm going to tell you why. It is because when they go to their nutritionists that tell them over and over and over, you have to eat meat products, and don't you eat the carbs, where I've found that carbs are not the problem. It is the meat consumption that is actually harming the diabetics. The dairy products are harming the diabetics. It's because the doctors are telling them how to eat and they don't actually know anything about nutrition, and they shouldn't be telling them how to eat. And I actually asked my doctor, like, how much nutrition class you had? And he's like, none. So I'm like, why am I listening to somebody that has no education on how to eat? And that's where the big problem is with diabetics.
I agree with you, Josh, but don't you think it's also that it's not easy? And it's much easier for someone to just pop a pill or, continue to eat the food that they enjoy eating and take a shot and just manage it and just live with it because they like doing that, and that's the easy thing to do.
Yes, that's another big thing too, because there's so much medicine out there that they can take and say, well, it's going to make me better. But most of those diabetic medicines, you get on one and then you take in 3, 4, 5 medicines.
Yeah, it's because it's not going to make you better. It's going to make you coast. And then you get on a diabetes medication, and within a couple of years, you're on 3 other medications to counteract all the side effects from that original medicine.
And then they start you off with a pill that you end up on insulin. And you shouldn't be taking insulin as a type 2. You should be, this is where it gets confusing to people, because food is medicine. And I've learned that food is medicine, and it can cure a type 2 right away. Like right away, it can start curing them. And if they knew this information, I don't see why we're not preaching this every day to diabetics, every single day. Just like it could cure heart disease. And there's so much information that's not being spread out to people. I'm sorry, I'm very passionate about this.
No, and you should be, and you should be. Where did the colitis come in?
I had the inflammation of my intestines. That's what colitis is. Well, I guess from my diet, I was eating so bad, I could barely walk. My back hurt all the time, and they came and they found that I had colitis. It was the inflammation of my intestines. Well, guess what happened to that too from eating well, from eating plant-based. Something they said I would never get rid of, that I had to take 4 or 5 pills a day for. And I was like, I'm not taking these pills. I'm going to do something and get off all this. And completely gone now. And the doctor has no idea how I got rid of it.
So it doesn't even show up?
Nope. Completely gone.
Yeah, see, that's the other thing. I think people don't think it's going to happen to them, right? And we've talked about this so many times. But if you didn't have that doctor tell you to look in the mirror, who knows where you would have been. If you didn't have those insulin shock sessions where they had to bring you back to life, you may not have ever made a change, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So unfortunately, so many people are just waiting for that tragic moment to happen to themselves or someone they love before they're going to make a change. And one of the things that we obviously try to do, and you're doing as well, is trying to get people before they get to that point and try to help them understand and get the information, teach them how to do it and change their lives before they really have to.
And that's correct, because I could have not woke up from that at all. I could have not been here speaking to y'all today because I wasn't doing anything, and now I know what I have to do, and I'm trying to tell other people's I'm trying to give them the knowledge of it, because most people don't know about how we eat. And I know y'all get it all the time too, because I watch y'all podcasts all the time, and y'all talk about it. Like, most people just don't know about this stuff.
Yeah, we got to reach more people.
You got to reach more people, but you've got to reach them over and over and over again, because we do have conversations with people one-on-one. I mean, the people who are closest to you are often the people who are hardest to reach. But, so people who are close to us, but also people who are reaching out to us because of Plant Trainers, because of our coaching business, because of what we do. And you say, if you make these changes, let's see what the results are going to be. Let's see what changes in you by making these changes in your lifestyle. And for a lot of them, there's always excuses why it couldn't work, or they're picky eaters, or it's not going to work anyway, or they're going on vacation. And that's totally not their fault, because they're just not there yet. They haven't seen it yet. They don't want it bad enough yet. But once you reach them 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 8 times, then it starts to hit home a little bit, and you get tired of the conversation and just talking, and you want to start making action. So, people need to be listening to this over. Like, some of the things that we're saying today is a broken record on this podcast. The fact that doctors don't have the nutrition, the fact that you could change your diet and within 2-3 days, your insulin levels or your blood sugar levels can change. I know that my dad, when he comes to visit, if he doesn't adjust his insulin, then there's usually footsteps at 3:00 in the morning, him going downstairs to jug some orange juice because he's low, because he's eating the food that we're serving him. And his body is all of a sudden, absorbing the blood sugar, right? Like, he's getting rid of it. So it's a big issue, and people need to learn how to deal with that as well, so that it doesn't scare them, because just as your insulin shocks were scary, so are lows.
Yes.
Lows can take your life as well.
Correct. You are correct. It's a fast way to die. The other way is to lose your kidneys and your eyes. It's a slow, painful, but I'd rather do what I'm doing now and try to manage those lows, because the other way, it's a slow, painful death. Who wants to die a slow, painful death? I don't. I know y'all don't want to, and nobody wants to die. But, there is a point where you have to say, I'm going to start doing something where I'm not going to die. I'm going to get out there and do something about it. And when y'all was just talking about the closest people around you is the hardest ones to change, I didn't know if I could do this or not, but Plant Pure Nation came down here and started filming, because I got my dad to actually start eating like me. And my dad is about 340 pounds, and I'm probably gonna get a little emotional, but my mom died of a heart attack, and he has heart problems too, and he started eating like us, and he's actually lost 30 pounds in like a month, and his cholesterol went from 211 to 142 in a matter of 15 days. How big of a change is that from just eating plants? That's what I'm trying to tell people.
And that's another reason why it's so important that people like you are sharing their story, because while there are some similarities in people's stories, there are many differences, and your story is going to hit someone else in a different and unique way than my story would, or someone else's story would. So thank you for sharing your story. I think it's really important, and it's amazing the progress that your father has made, and I'm sure he will continue to make incredible progress as he continues with this lifestyle. So let me ask you another question, because we were only talking about the plants right now, and you mentioned the treadmill on the balcony very briefly, but what else did you do with your lifestyle other than eating plants? Because right now you're down to what, 150 from 230 plus?
Yeah, I had got down to about 130-ish, but I started doing more weights to work on my core and all, but I became a runner. I started running. So now I'm actually training for a full marathon while we talk. Well, not today, but I'm actually training for a full marathon. I've ran 2 half marathons. I've run a bunch of 10Ks, bunch of 5Ks. I run about 7 days a week. I became very athletic now. And, you know, it was a bonus that I lost almost 100 pounds of weight. And that's just from getting more exercise, eating right. And, you know, all that's due to one person talking to me. And that's from Josh LaJaunie putting that bug in my head saying, dude, give this a try. Because if he'd have never talked to me, I'd still been trying to do the nutrition that the dietitian area was trying to tell me at the hospital that obviously hadn't worked for 30-something years.
How did you meet Josh?
Me and him are actually childhood friends. We grew up together, and we kind of got where we didn't talk for a while, and I would see him, and I was like, man, that guy's losing a lot of weight. So that's what actually made me talk to him, because I seen him getting very, very skinny, because he was the big guy ever since we were kids. And I was like, man, what's going on? And that's when he told me about that. And that's when everything changed in my life, talking to him.
Well, he's a very motivating guy and very inspirational, and I'm sure he would say this to you as well. You're the one who did the work, right? He spoke in your ear, he got you going, but you did the work. I mean, as a 230 plus person, to start running to the point where you're running 7 days a week, training for a full marathon, done a couple already under your belt, you did the work, man. Good job. Like, that is on you. You've changed your life.
He tells me, we actually talk a lot now, and he tells me that all the time. He said, dude, he said, I have done nothing. You are the one that done everything. He said, I just gave you the knowledge, and that's what I'm trying to do now too. Give people the knowledge that they need, because being a type 1 diabetic or diabetic, this is you have to exercise to get that insulin into your blood. And that's what people need to know too, because that's a big part of this. If I wouldn't have started exercising too, my sugars probably wouldn't have got as good, or probably would have. I don't know, because I exercise a lot. But that exercise, when you exercise for a type 1 diabetic, it actually lets that insulin get into your blood cells and lets it work better. If that makes any sense. Most diabetics going to know what I'm talking about. But like I say, to normal people, it's hard for them to get.
Let's make that clear for everybody who shared out this podcast with their loved ones who are hearing this message maybe for the first time. That doesn't mean that you're going to outrun your double bacon cheeseburger. Diet is the bigger part of it, but when you combine that with the exercise, then, you know, you're golden.
Completely. Because I'll say this too. At one point, I work at a chemical plant, and I had to work a month straight, so I didn't run at all. And I still lost 10 pounds in that month. So it's more about the food that you're eating if you're looking to lose weight. It's more about the food that you're eating than it is about the exercise if you're trying to lose weight.
And if you could only do one at a time, then you start with the food.
Correct.
And so you have the microphone in front of you, and everybody on this planet who has diabetes is listening to this podcast right now. So what is the most important thing that you could tell them to help them get rid of or change their state of diabetes right now?
Go out, watch Forks Over Knives, watch What the Health, get the knowledge that you need to change. Because if I didn't have this knowledge of all this stuff that I was told and learned, you're not going to know how to change the diabetes. You're not going to know why you're changing the diabetes. Because if you go listen to Forks Over Knives, they actually tell you why you are doing it. And that's a big step. You have to change the food because the meat is actually blocking, it blocks the insulin to get into the cell. That's what diabetics don't understand. And they're preaching them to eat meat to survive. And they don't need it. They don't need it. I am living proof. You do not need it.
Yeah, for sure. And knowledge is power. And you had someone supporting you, Josh. And I'm sure there are listeners right now that have diabetes that want to overcome it, want to challenge it, and also want the support. So if somebody wants to reach out and connect with you, Josh, where would be the best places or place for them to go?
They can always reach me on Facebook. My name's Joshua Turner. And they can message me anytime, and I have no problem talking to any diabetic because I've talked to many people and many diabetics. And they can reach out to me on Instagram. I'm not exactly sure what my Instagram name is, but it's Josh Turner on there. I'm not exactly sure the whatever else is on there.
That's okay. We'll find it. We're going to link to all your social media on the Plant Trainers podcast show notes page for this episode. And
they could find you at Josh Turner on Facebook, and you're Josh_Turner 1977 on Instagram.
Yes, that's on Instagram. Yes, that's
now
it.
We know how
but
old
I'm
you
Joshua Turner. It's going to be Joshua Turner on Facebook.
Yeah, so we'll link to all that in our show notes so people can connect with you and get your support.
Josh, we want to thank you so much for being on the Plant Trainers podcast today. We are so thrilled that you were able to make this change for yourself, that you're able to make this change with your father, help so many other people and everything that you do. And thank you so, so much. And we know that you're going to change somebody else today.
And thank y'all for letting me speak and get this knowledge out to people. And y'all do a great job at what y'all do too.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any other podcast listening platforms. We appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it ensures other people will find us too. Thanks to our patrons. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference. Connect and follow us on Instagram and Twitter @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at www.planttrainers.com for awesome plant-based recipes and a list of our services. Email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so we can answer them on our upcoming Facebook Lives. We hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day.